What makes you think that India will be number one, or India, it is the time for India as a healthcare, though your book mentions it in a great way, but still a little elaborative way so that people in India understand the value of India and the opportunities lying in India, especially in healthcare?
So I think one thing which I need to be clear is that India still has one of the world's largest population as we speak. It also has one of the youngest population in the world, right? We have an average age is much lower than rest of the world is. And that is in line with what Prime Minister Modi is talking about, the Viksit Bharat. We're talking about the next 50 years will be India's 50 years. There's a reason for it.
After the pandemic, there have been a lot of issues, including mental health as well, because people were isolated for so long. But at the end, there are always conflicting views because the humans suffered, but the nature healed itself. Now, as the pandemic has opened, now we're living normal lives. Do you think that humans have learned something out of it?
So one thing we learned that the diseases has no boundaries, right? Whether you are living in US or in Canada, or whether you're living in a state of Punjab or in Delhi or Kerala, it doesn't matter. The virus traveled faster. They traveled from China, came to India, came to rest of the world. And whether you have money or not, whether you have protection or not, like for example, you could be the president of the US, still got sick with COVID.
How has healthcare evolved in the last 4 years digitally? And how do you see it evolving even further, keeping India as the epicenter?
So one thing which I think fast-tracked in healthcare is adoption or adaptation of technology. Healthcare or technology was always at least a decade or longer behind rest of the other industries. Like for example, banking always had e-wallets and credit cards and debit cards and ATM machines, but hospitals were still using paper medical records and paper prescription pads, and regular consultations. But COVID has made it acceptable to have a telemedicine consultation, even though the technology was there a decade earlier. People were hesitant to use it.
Hi, Dr. Joseph Chalil. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm super excited today. First reason, you are a lucky mascot for a podcast. So, you and I have a friend, Mr. Ketan Kalra. You initiated this podcast. You said yes, and that's how we started the Supreet Singh Show. So, it's always special meeting you. And it's even more special because I have your book with me, India Beyond the Pandemic, which became Amazon bestseller on three
categories.
Three categories on day one, which is
Correct.
A huge thing. So first of all, congratulations and thanks again for coming back on the Supreet Singh Show.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's a great honor and great pleasure to come back here. I mean, congrats on your success. Looks like you have now tens of thousands of viewers already, within the past few months. And I wish you lakhs and lakhs of viewers, or millions of viewers going forward. And because, your conversations are from your heart and seem to have very great feedback I've been hearing, even with the book launch. I'll be talking about the book that, you hosted a round table there or a panel discussion, which was the best piece of that launch event. So thank you so much for coming into Delhi, making that happen. The ministers, the ambassadors, they appreciate what you did, and the candor at which you asked the questions, and they were from all over the world. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You're such a humble personality. You gave me that opportunity, and you've always been pushing me to do things, and this gives me a huge motivation. And that's, I think, one of the major reasons I was able to moderate such a huge, dignified jury over there. And most of all, The best thing which I want to mention about you and the book is you're very passionate about India. You're very bullish on India.
Mm-hmm.
Being a US citizen, you're always promoting India and Indian healthcare. So we'll start from there. Like, why are you so optimistic about India and its healthcare?
Let me be maybe clear from the beginning. I'm a Indian by birth, Indian in my mind. You can take, you can take me away from India, but you cannot take India away from me. I am also an overseas citizen of India. I'm proud to be one, and someday, hopefully, full dual citizen of India, along with American, someday when it's get approved. But all that aside, talking as a logical person, I could see sitting in the US, the future, because I could see other countries. I could see Canada, I could see Europe, I could see how UK is doing, I could see how Germany is going, I could see how Japan is doing. I am very bullish on India because I believe the next maybe 3, 4, 5 decades belong to India and to Indians. And I'm 100% sure that in healthcare, especially, India will lead the world in the next decades to come.
Next 3 to 5 decades, almost like 50 years, you need to say.
Yeah.
So, how do you see that happening? Because still, there are so many challenges in India. But at the same time, what your book mentions as well, that when the pandemic started, people had a different thought process that India will be in a mess in this pandemic. But it was the other way around. Other countries were not able to manage, but India managed it so well that we supplied more than 2.2 billion vaccines to the world and to India as well. I just want your take as an Indo-American. What makes you think that India will be number one, or India, it is the time for India as a healthcare, though your book mentions it in a great way, but still a little elaborative way so that people in India understand the value of India and the opportunities lying in India, especially in healthcare.
So I think one thing which I need to be clear is that India still has one of the world's largest population as we speak. It also has one of the youngest population in the world, right? We have an average age is much lower than rest of the world is. And that is in line with what Prime Minister Modi is talking about, the Viksit Bharat. We're talking about the next 50 years will be India's 50 years. There's a reason for it. It's because the next 50 years, India will remain young. After that 50 years, India will start aging because, as the population, the reproductive rate of Indians are also coming down. Right now, our population is growing because our people are aging, not because we are producing more children. So unless we change that, unless we reverse that and we have more children, India will start aging in another 30, 40 years or so. But there are examples of some states in India which already started aging. I would say examples might be in Kerala or Punjab, where the population actually is aging now or has reached their tipping point.
One of the major reasons is like we are migrating a lot from these two states to other parts of the world.
That's one thing, and plus the population control has reached these states early on. Like Punjab and Kerala had started controlling population maybe 2 decades earlier to UP and other states. So I would assume that it's a lagging indicator when because you have to have around 2.2 children per family to replace the current level of population. So if you have less than 2 kids or 2 kids or less or 3 kids or less, you're not actually replacing the population, you are actually reducing the population. So we had this, we are 2 hours 2, those sort of a campaign in the past is now causing India to be getting, to see the reduction in population in those states.
But at the same time, there's always a question that the population of India is booming a lot and has boomed in a big way. I think that's one of the major reasons we are one of the youngest populations
Correct.
in the world right now. But looking at the resources, what we have, if the population number increases, the younger population, we reproduce more, wouldn't it affect the other parts of the ecosystem?
It does, but the problem is the entire world is shrinking, right? Every other country, the population growth has reduced even further. Americans have less than one kid. Many families are not, many people are not getting married, not having children. Even if they have a child, they have one child. So the rest of the same is Japan, same as Europe. So they're aging, their population are aging. Their numbers were increasing for the past 2 decades because of the healthcare advances in those countries where people were living longer. Having a person living up to 100-year-old, of course, will increase the population, but it is not a healthy way of managing, because who's going to manage these patients? Who's going to manage this population? They don't have enough younger generation to pay into their Social Security or retirement income. They don't have younger people to pay taxes for these, to care for these old people. They don't have enough doctors who are also retiring at the same phase. So they'll have significant shortage, and that's the biggest discussion we had in this book, is that one of the key predictable problems coming up is, along with the population decline, would be the aging and the reduction in healthcare workforce. That's where India comes in the next few decades, where India could be the only source of this trained healthcare workforce, whether it's doctors, nurses, mid-level providers, social workers, caregivers. They won't be enough. You can have all that technology you want. You can have all the chat GPTs and advances in technology, but they will not replace a human touch. They will not replace a doctor. If we believe that when computers came in first, that computers going to replace human being, it didn't happen. When we believed that tractors came in, we thought tractors going to replace farmers. That didn't happen either. Of course, farmers became more productive. They started doing cultivation in larger plots of land versus what they could do in one day. Maybe they could sow the seed and harvest the rice paddy or wheat faster, but it did not eliminate farmers. Same way, the technology will not eliminate; it will enhance. But we still need more human beings, more trained medical personnel to help the world.
Actually, you're right. Like, for example, the technology will help us reduce our timelines. It will help us reduce our dependency on human resources, but humans would be required to
Exactly.
run those machines as well.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, the commands are supposed to be given by the humans.
And who's going to program them? Most likely Indians, right?
You're right, in a way. So India beyond the pandemic. So the pandemic was a seismic shift for the world. Everybody knows about that. That before the pandemic started, the world was a different place to live. As the pandemic came in, things were very different. Like nobody hugging became a crime. So
I know.
so meeting people became a crime. So the paradigm changed. The entire paradigm of the world changed. And after the pandemic, there have been a lot of issues, including mental health as well, because people were isolated for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, after the pandemic ended, it was always told that the nature healed itself, whereas there are always conflicting views because the humans suffered, but the nature healed itself. Now, as the pandemic has opened, now we're living normal lives. Do you think that humans have learned something out of it?
I hope and I wish so, because again, one thing we can learn from this book is that, again, this exposes how the world handled the pandemic compared to India. So one thing we learned, that the diseases has no boundaries, right? Whether you are living in US or in Canada, or whether you're living in a state of Punjab or in Delhi or Kerala, it doesn't matter. The virus traveled faster. They traveled from China, came to India, came to rest of the world. And whether you have money or not, whether you have protection or not, like, for example, you could be the president of the US, still got sick with COVID. You could be the prime minister of UK, got sick with COVID. Prime minister of Canada was sick with COVID. Most of the European heads of state was down with COVID. So it doesn't matter how many millions or billions you spent on creating black cat securities and bulletproof cars, it doesn't matter how many masks you wear, your presidents wear, you still were affected by COVID. This is one thing which showed us that diseases show no boundaries, and it doesn't discriminate but against rich or poor, people who have or have not, people who have insurance or no insurance, people who have money or no money. So it also humanizes us in the sense that we need to think about us as more of the same, that we need to take care of everybody. It's not just taking care of very few. So it does teach us something. And I hope we learn something from it. But the book talks about is that even though every country suffered, India did suffer much and made its own set of mistakes. We talk about it in the first couple or three phases in the pandemic in India. But coming out of it, I would say we are better off than the rest of the country, or rest of the world.
Like a few examples you would like to share.
When the pandemic started, same thing in the US, we didn't have any gloves. We ran out of masks. We didn't even have a 95 mask to give out. We didn't have PPE kits. This same story in UK, same story in Germany, same story in US, same story in Canada. We ran out of ventilators and beds. But India had the same thing. But remember, India started manufacturing everything. Instead of depending on one country for everything, India started making gloves and masks and medicines and vaccines, not just for its own use, but to supply for the rest of the world. So if one country have shown that, hey, we can rise up and learn from crises and help the world in such situation, if whether it is by accident or by an act of God or by very skilled strategic leadership and management, India have shown the world that we can shine, and we did shine better. And that's exactly the story here.
As an Indian, I feel very proud when we go outside and people actually appreciate how India has come out of the pandemic. And you have Ambassador Kapoor and Professor Nalapad, you have explained it so well in the book. And it makes you feel very proud about being an Indian like today.
It does make a huge difference when they see Indian outside. Like for example, when the Indian Prime Minister travels abroad and a foreign president falls on his feet. It never happens before in the history of India. I've never seen it in my adult life. I don't think I ever see it again. They're not doing it because he's respecting the Prime Minister of India. He's respecting the people of India for what they have done to his country by supplying free vaccines to his country and saving their lives. Whatever we talk about vaccines, I know there's a controversy about side effects of vaccines or whatever, but I believe that we are better off with vaccines than without vaccines. So we avoided more deaths using vaccines than few deaths which might have cost because of the side effects of vaccines, whether it's blood clots or accidents or heart attacks or whatever it might be.
Because nowadays there's quite a lot of controversy booming up that the vaccines, especially Covishield.
It's not just Covishield. It is the same story for the Pfizer vaccine in the US, same story for the every other vaccines available worldwide. All vaccines have some sort of increased clotting disorders, whatever. But it's not long term. It is short term. It could be for maybe 45 to 50 days or 2 months after the vaccine usage. So just because you took a vaccine 3 years or 2 years earlier, you are not having side effect now. It doesn't make sense. But so that's what I've seen from my medical literature review.
As you mentioned many times, that this book is not just a book; it's a roadmap of what healthcare opportunities will also come up and how people can involve themselves in the healthcare boom happening from India to the world. So, first of all, the design of the book is amazing. I love the colors, the color blue. It looks really nice. Uh, there's in contents, the chapter 11, tapping into the digital world. So how has healthcare evolved in the last 4 years digitally, and How do you see it evolving even further, keeping India as the epicenter?
So one thing which I think fast-tracked um, in healthcare is adoption or adaptation of technology. Healthcare or technology was always at least a decade or longer behind rest of the other industries. Like for example, banking always had e-wallets and credit cards and debit cards and ATM machines, but hospitals were still using paper medical records and paper prescription pads, and regular consultations. But COVID has made it acceptable to have a telemedicine consultation, even though the technology was there a decade earlier. People were hesitant to use it. So now, to a point, patients were afraid to go to a hospital or see other patients next to them, or even to see the doctor, thinking, what if the doctor has COVID? So they felt safer talking to a camera or seeing a patient or doctor on the screen, and then discussing the cases with him or her, right?
Do you still feel that people are accepting telemedicine as they go to a doctor in an
No,
OP?
not yet. There's nothing changes a human touch, right? If a one-on-one conversation in person, or a doctor touching your skin
Makes you feel better.
makes you feel much better immediately. The 50% of all diseases, as we call it, is psychosomatic. It's in your mind. A nice conversation with the doctor most likely cure 50% of your disease. Because if you just want to give a comfort that, hey, you're okay, what you feel, it's nothing to worry about. Maybe your heart is beating faster. Maybe you're breathing faster. Maybe your tummy is making some sound. But when the doctor says, that's okay, that's normal, for your age, for your activity, for what you've done or what you ate or what you're going through, that makes you feel better. So when you talk about health, health is not just in your body. It's your health in your mind, in your spirit, and your body. So it's a holistic health as opposed to just lack of illness. Lack of illness is not health. You have to feel healthy. Doesn't mean you just don't have sickness, but you need to be fit. You need to be well in your head, in your mind, in your spirit. That way you are fully healthy and happy, so you can lead a better life versus just absence of sickness. But having said that, telemedicine is still more acceptable. A lot of people have done a lot more telemedicine visits, especially in India, compared to the rest of the world. We have digitized medical records in India. We have digitized vaccine. All the vaccines given in India were done through digital records. So there is no paper trail. There's the COVID app. And it's linked to Arogya Setu. So it's been a vast number of digital innovations they brought in, which I don't think any other country has done. So if you look in my bag, I will still have a COVID vaccine card, which is a physically written paper card in my pocket in the US, because America don't have a digital vaccine card. So it's easily duplicatable. If you get people were getting fake vaccine cards from Amazon and filling it up their own without ever taking a COVID vaccine in their life. In India, that wasn't possible because everything is digital, and you can download only a digital copy of your original vaccine certificate.
It can be verified like within 2 minutes or 5 minutes.
Not in the US one. It's a physical paper card, handwritten, with no proof of, no way to track it. Who signed it, who wrote it, who got it, nothing.
I think personally, I've been visiting countries like Canada. So what I've found is that the doctor wait times have increased multifolds, and what people from the local community, they tell that it has grown, that the waiting time has grown after the COVID, since the COVID has happened. What is the major reason? One is you mentioning that the number of doctors to the patients is very less, which is a fact, and aging populations, another thing. And is it also that the privatization of hospitals in some certain of these countries is not allowed, and more are run by the government hospitals, whereas in India it's a hybrid model. Government is also running its hospitals, whereas private players are also there. And at the same time, the number of doctors, though the number is still lagging in terms of what is required, but still the number is much higher as compared to other countries. So in future, do you think that because of this, there is going to be a sport in medical tourism towards India, or these countries are going to find solutions?
The increase in wait time might be multifaceted, and the reasons might be different. In the sense, when the COVID was happening, if I had a regular well visit, or if I had to take care of some other issues, maybe I postponed it. I did not go to the doctor because I thought, it's okay, I'll wait till COVID's over, or it was difficult to get an appointment because of the COVID going on, because every appointment was restricted. There was space given between appointments. There was sanitization of the offices, and doctors were, not able to see as many patients as before because it was to avoid crowding of offices. So they stopped seeing, if they were seeing 30 patients, and during COVID time they saw less patients. One option. Number two, the patients could have postponed their regular visits, let's say elective procedures, surgeries, things like that, which they could wait for. Let's say if somebody needed a knee transplant or a hip replacement or maybe a physical therapy treatment or something like that, they would have postponed it.
So people have stopped lingering on their health issues.
Exactly. And then waiting, and then after the COVID's over, now they're going back to the office, increasing the appointments and trying to fill in the available slots. That could also create a backlog.
Yes.
And the third thing is maybe there is some lingering increased post-COVID, long COVID as we call it, syndromes. Some people never actually recovered from COVID 100%. So that could be there, that they're not back to their normal self. Not everybody were lucky, like you or me, to be healthy and alive after the COVID. Some people are still suffering from it. So you've got to be understanding that. So they need longer term care. So there might be that. So again, I don't know the exact reason why it's happening in Canada. In US, again, similar issues, but the appointment times have normalized. There is no increased wait times yet. But I'm hoping, I don't know whether that will lead to medical tourism yet. But the challenge has been that the distance between the countries, whether it is from Canada or US, and then traveling from US and Canada on a flight for 12, 13 hours, it's not that easy as we thought it would be. And then there wasn't that easy way of getting a medical appointment in India, and then has a collaborative agreement with the airline, which arranges the travel plans. I don't think any of the Indian hospitals has done that yet. Of course, there are hospitals in India like Apollo or Manipal are currently doing it, but they're not working with airlines to create seamless travel partnerships and make it easy and then getting reimbursed. Because in America especially, the medical expenses are reimbursed through insurance companies. So unless Apollo hospitals or Manipal or Fortis or any of those or any other hospitals here are negotiating directly with the Blue Cross Blue Shield of US or with Aetna, Cigna, some of these major insurance companies, the patients still have to pay from out of pocket and then try to get it reimbursed. That's a more complicated process. But I'm not saying that will not happen in the future, but it hasn't happened yet.
Again, we are talking about the gaps, and it's not easy. Like, for example, there are if a patient is suffering, you would take a direct flight, and still there are not many direct flights to maybe Delhi or Mumbai or
not even seats available, even if they want to take a direct flight, because the airline has cut down on their seats, and the tourism has increased, because they've been all like tired of sitting at home for 2-3 years.
Yes.
Now they want to see the world.
Exactly. So there are certain issues, and probably, but if we discuss and address those, things can improve. This is my personal question. Healthcare is not. I feel healthcare is not a choice. You have to address it, and it is mandatory, because if the health is not right, nothing can work right with you, around you. because it doesn't affect only you, but the entire family as well, or
Sure.
the people associated with you. I personally feel people have become a little more conscious, but again, people have become casual as well. There is a second take what I've personally seen in people. Now people see that life is too short. Let's live it fully. One is that attitude, and because of that, there's been sport in drinking, smoking, even holidaying, over holidaying, and because of all these things, mental health issues have also come up because of overspending as well. What I personally feel, which certain people say that the next pandemic might be of mental health, because as the cases are booming and people are not able to curtail and take care of their mental health issues. So, have you touched upon any of these issues as well?
During COVID times, as you know, that people were so tired of staying in one room, people who are living in apartments. So they have decided we're not going to live in this apartment anymore. So they don't want to live in New York City. So people like Manhattan, people started abandoning and moving to places like Florida, where they could walk out and see some open skies. So they make conscious choices in life and then the work situations have changed. Before, most employers mandated that everybody be at work site from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or whatever it might be. I don't know what's the situation in India. Like people are now back to work mandatorily.
I think it's still a hybrid model in a lot of places. But like, for example, companies like ours, it's very difficult to work in a hybrid model because we are a product-based company. But a lot of IT companies, I think, still they are following it in a certain way. But when I personally talk to a lot of people, some people are very happy with it. That 2 days in a week they are going to the office, 3 days, because in metropolitans they have to go through the traffic situations as well. So that way it is fine. But 100% work from home, they are not very up for it because it is affecting their mental health, staying in the
Correct.
same room and not meeting people. So that affects in a way. Though the productivity hasn't reduced, but personally, people have got a little affected mentally. So this is the change.
So I think I agree with you 100%. The customer facing jobs or low end jobs or people who require to be in an office to do accounting and making sure that the books are kept or the products are shipped from one place to another, or packaging need to be done or order need to be received. These are maybe jobs couldn't be outsourced to work from home. But the high-end jobs, like people who are doing programming or strategy planning, or people who are doing marketing or IT or customer service, or let's say a CFO or a CEO or or a chief marketing officer or even a chief medical officer like myself, the competition for such jobs demand has gone up so much that to retain the talent, these companies are forced to maintain their hybrid model or 100% work from home model, because there's a tax advantages to that too. Like, for example, in America, if I work in US, I have to pay, work in Manhattan. If I'm living in Manhattan, I have to pay a city tax. I have to pay a New York state tax along with my national income tax. If I live in Florida, I don't have a city tax. I don't have a state tax. All I have to pay is just the national income tax. So which is a maybe 12 to 15 to 20% difference in my salary. So and plus it saves money in travel time, lease payments, insurances, mortgages in multiple, houses in big cities versus small cities. So I've seen a constant migration of high-end talent, in the sense of like the CEOs, CFOs, CMOs, high-end programmers moving to states like Florida, to Texas, and they can, as long as they have a high bandwidth internet and they have access to a home office, they can work from home. And the companies are in demand. No one is saying that you have to be on site. Even many of the teaching jobs, like professors, now are done through Zoom, even though it used to be all classroom based. Now the classrooms have become hybrid. So they're not going back in time. Like, for example, we convert everything to digital medical records. People are not going back in and creating paper records now. Same way in the job situation, it's also not happening that you're not becoming 100%.
Are the companies and people preparing itself if in case anything of this sort happens again? So they are fully prepared.
I'm not sure it is that the companies are intentionally preparing for such a scenario. I don't think companies want work from home workforce. I believe that the water cooler discussions, when people meet and talk to each other, ideation happens. I don't think that happens, that social interactions happens when you work from home. So I'm not sure it's actually better for the companies, but they have no choice but to retain the talent. They would have to maintain it, but then say that, hey, you have to be in the office 2 to 3 days a week or something like that. So people rather drive or fly to an office. And then people are also switching the offices. I've seen many large companies moving the office out of Manhattan and Chicago and cities like that, or California, to Texas or inner cities. So they don't have to maintain this high rent office space, because what's the purpose of having an office space which can sit in 200 people when you only have 15 people showing up for work? So you move to a smaller location outside of the city, and then you have everybody else work from home, work remotely. So it work out financially better for the company. The bad thing is the mental aspects that you mentioned. A person who is working from home is less likely to be more mobile, more likely to be active in their mind. They're not actually, dressing up and going to, take a train or a bus or driving an hour to office, having a fixed meal, a breakfast or a lunch or a dinner. But we tend, once you're at home, you tend to snack more. Yes. And then your work time, even though you're working from home doesn't start from 9 to 5. So your work time, actually you work more from home, because you don't shut down your office computer at 5 p.m. Because you're not typically in an office and you're leaving with your colleagues.
Yes.
So it's affecting your health. Maybe after COVID, everybody started taking care of themselves. They wanted, they were, exercising more. They were eating right. Maybe they wanted to lose weight after COVID's over. Then they heard people who were exercising were getting more heart attacks and strokes and whatever, because of increased side effects from vaccines or from blood clots. So that scared people away. We got some high profile people, like movie stars, were dying in young age after COVID from exercising. So then the people stopped working out. Now they're worse off. So now they're mentally not happy because they're stuck at home. No matter how friendly your family is, when you are there together for 24 hours, 7 days a week, frictions do happen. And then it end up, having family issues, which affecting your work life, which affecting your personal life, which affecting your mental life. And the same thing with kids. When you are studying, sitting in your bedroom, you're not dressing up, you're just changing your top, versus you're getting up and dressing up to go to school. You're sitting on your bed and watching on Zoom. Is it the right mental exercise we're giving to our kids? What happened to their social interactions? Kids learn to behave better when they talk to each other, they play with each other, when they study together, when they fight each other, when they argue, when they go for a movie together. Those things doesn't happen as often as it was before COVID. Have you seen movie halls being full again? In America, no, it's still empty. It hasn't been back to normal. Restaurants which closed, many of them haven't opened back up yet again. The entertainment industry hasn't opened back up again. So people are. And another thing is they're overspending, over traveling, trying to make up for what they missed. So it's a complex world, and there is no easy solution.
Healthcare in general, if you talk about it, it's an alphabet word, but it covers so many things. Healthcare can start from your food, the way you think, the way you address preventive form of taking care of your health issues, or not letting the health issues happen. You talked about a term called as holistic health. So it's a very new word which has come up, and a lot of people are talking about it. But technically, holistic health is what our Indian ancient system has always been talking about. Do you feel it is a high time to go back to the Indian ancient roots of having a holistic health?
I would say the Indian system of medicine, the Indian system of Ayurveda, it is a science of life. It wasn't, we call in English system, we call it healthcare, but are we truly caring for anyone's health? It is, if you're a patient, you get sick, you come to me, I fix you, and you come back again with the same disease, I fix you again. So that's a disease fixing system. It's a good marketing name to call it healthcare, but it's not Ayurveda. It is not the life or the science of life. So do I make you work out? Do I make you eat right? Do I make you making sure you have a good mental health? Do I make you practice some martial arts?
Meditation.
Meditation or yoga. The Indian system of ancient system had everything together. They had yoga, they had diet, they had exercise in the name of self-defense courses. They had kalari paitu or things like that, which were common at that time. Even the same people who were treating diseases were also training you in defending your physical fitness, making sure you are good in your prayers and Sanskrit slogans and Upanishads and teaching you stories about what happened in ancient times. So making you feel wanted, making you feel healthy in your mind and spirit, along with your body. That I would say may be preferred with the new scientific innovations happening. So we can have it all. It doesn't have to be just the going back in times. Maybe you could have the modern way of the genomic health, the new way of personalized medicine, as long as we bring in health in body, mind, and spirit along with it, and then look for healthy life as opposed to just disease care or disease fixing systems. So again, it's a complex thought, but prevention is always better than cure.
Very rightly said. Prevention is better than cure. It's a very old saying, but it's valid at all points, at every time of life or the world, I would say. If I come back to your book, there's so many things which I would want to talk about, but the thing which I don't want to miss about talking is the geoeconomics and the geopolitics around the pandemic and how India has emerged out of that, and how the world now sees India as the leader in healthcare.
So it's critical aspects because of the source and origin of COVID, which we talk about in this book, and the comparison between our neighbors, whether how India managed the pandemic compared to either China or Bangladesh or Pakistan, but again, mostly China, is that you can see that they had this zero COVID policy. They were locking up apartment buildings, actually sealing them shut so that people with COVID doesn't escape to the common streets. It was completely martial law, how they managed it. But there are stories about fires happening in these apartment complexes which were sealed for COVID patients, and patients dying because they couldn't escape and they were jumping off the windows because they couldn't come out of the door, and firemen could not enter because it's sealed. Compared to India, where we, of course, went into lockdown early on, but opened up soon enough so that our economy doesn't suffer, to a point that we are now the fastest growing economy in the world. We are, becoming one of the best developed country in the world pretty soon. We are becoming the third, largest GDP-wise economy in the world. So it all becomes because of, even though at the same time there is two wars happening, with Russia, Ukraine, with Israel and Gaza. Again, wars are not good. Wars during COVID times even worse. So I'm not sure why we are doing it, But is there a bright spot in all this? It is India. And sometimes I have to give kudos to the leadership of the Indian government, which has made this happen in this time. And that's why I believe the next few decades belong to India in this, and we talk in detail about what India can do. Again, it's not like India will automatically become a leader. There are things India has to do, like fix ourselves so that we can be ready for the world. So fixing everything from our internal systems of healthcare, fixing our education system in medicine, you know, bringing a uniform healthcare, like when I talk about in this book, is one India, one healthcare policy, because we have differences. Currently, healthcare is a state subject in India. So the money is given to the state. Each state spends as they wish. They have their own plans. But one thing COVID has shown us is that the virus sees no borders. It doesn't matter whether you're from Punjab or you're from Chandigarh or you're from Delhi or from Kerala. You know, the virus will attack you, right? So having a different Kerala system versus a Punjab system versus a Tamil Nadu system versus a Delhi system, it doesn't work. So maybe it's time, because the technology is leveling the playing field. A doctor in Punjab can now consult with a patient in Cochin, in Kerala, and also maybe another patient in Chennai, and prescribe medicines through internet, which is delivered through an online pharmacy, maybe like PsychoCare. So it shows there is a lot of interstate commerce happening. So having a state-managed system will not work. So I'm not sure how it need to be done, what amendments need to be done in Constitution, so that having a uniform healthcare, whether you live in Kerala, whether you live in Tamil Nadu, Bangalore, or Assam, or Andhra Pradesh, or Delhi, or Mohali, it shouldn't matter. You should have uniform access to healthcare. Another thing which I push for this health in this book is about the Ayushman Bharat program, which is a wonderful program of giving up to 5 lakh insurance per member of the family under the poverty line. And going forward, I believe, as per Prime Minister's new promise, anyone over 70-year-old would get Ayushman Bharat. But the problem with that system is that it is currently only reimbursed for hospital care. The emphasis should be given on preventing hospital care, preventing hospital admissions, and managing chronic diseases, so we can protect these patients and prevent them from getting into hospital. So I'm hoping that someday the Prime Minister's office will make the changes and include an Ayushman Bharat program for managing chronic diseases, which can then protect these patients from going into hospitals in long-term care. Even if it's just 50,000 rupees per year, it doesn't matter. Even if it's a small amount, irrespective of potentially their income, but an annual physical exam should be covered for everybody. So maybe at primary health centers, maybe in private-public partnerships, we need to strengthen our primary health system. We need to, again, India, one thing we've shown in multiple documents is that infrastructure in healthcare has doubled and tripled in India in the past 10 years compared to the rest of the world. I had done an article in Sunday Guardian, I believe this was maybe 2 months ago or 3 months ago, showing that while America and Canada were stagnant in the number of medical schools opened, the number of doctors produced in the past 10 years, India has doubled in all these categories. That is, without doubt, an effort by the government in making it happen. We have tripled the number of AIIMS, number of medical schools and things like that. So it's a great. I think the medical school numbers are over 300% or something like that. So either way, that investment in healthcare infrastructure need to continue. We need to also bring in the quality into these systems, quality into hospitals. So like we talk about NABH accreditation in private hospitals. Many of the private hospitals in India are world's best, but what's the state of our government hospitals? How do we make sure that our government hospitals get NABH accreditation, that they are at world standards? They are, they provide care. How do we make sure our doctors are trained not just in the Indian standard of medicine? How do we make sure they are ready to manage patients from abroad or even to see patients online abroad? So, how do we make sure that their training is equivalent to the training given to a doctor in the US or a training given to a doctor in the UK or in Europe, so that someday there can be reciprocity in licensing between these, let's say, G20 countries, and a doctor trained in India can see or can potentially consult with the patient in Japan or UK or Germany. All we need to do is to train them right and teach them the languages.
Which can lead to one world, one healthcare.
Exactly. Let's start with one India, one healthcare, and let's lead to one world, one healthcare. Because ultimately, healthcare should be a human right. It's not a privilege some people should have. Everyone should have access to basic healthcare. I'm not saying should have access to plastic surgeries or premium services, but at least basic healthcare should be accessible to all at affordable prices. And it's possible.
It is definitely possible. And with the intent Professor Nalapat and Ambassador Kapoor have put in writing this book, and it's foreword written by Minister Puri and the preface by G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kanji. It is a testament, and I find that it should be not taught in schools, this book, because personally, I endorse this book because it says about a lot of things, and it gives you, it makes you think. It makes you go out of your comfort zone, of your mental comfort box, and you think that why healthcare is important, and you feel proud to be an Indian.
Thank
after
you.
reading
But
this book.
let this book be like a starting point of a discussion for how to prepare for a future. I thank my co-authors. I know they are much smarter, better than I am. A world-renowned ambassador Kapoor, and and a leading geopolitical expert, Professor Nalapat, under the leadership of our publisher Konarak, came together to make it happen. I'm extremely thankful to our senior most cabinet minister Hardeep Singh Puri and Sri Amitabh Kant, our G20 Sherpa, and our former Niti Aayog CEO, including we have endorsements from people like Dr. Randeep Guleria, Professor Ruby Pavankar, Dr. Zach Zakaria, Dr. Helena Isha. So there's a lot of endorsements coming into this book. They have read this book, and I believe I'm thankful for them spending their time in reviewing this. And I hope to the readers, you would enjoy the thought-provoking discussions in this book, and give us a review. That's all we ask for.
Thank you again. Thank you again for coming back on the Supreet Singh show.
Thanks for having me.
And probably, so when you came, we had 0 subscribers. So now today we have crossed 25,000. And probably the next time we'll have you, it'll cross maybe 100,000 now. And you were always our lucky mascot, and you always will be. And we are grateful to you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.